Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's possible to actually get North Korea to denuclearize. So he's very much out there freelancing with, I think, the most loathed leader on the face of the earth.
Interesting. Laura, your thoughts? What struck you?
Well, I heard a lot of word salad in that interview. I thought that there were a lot of topics on which he demonstrated a complete lack of understanding. He completely flubbed the meaning of the red line in Syria. He at one point criticized Obama for doing nothing in Syria, and then comes back and is now criticizing, told Obama that he should do nothing in Syria, and now is criticizing him for having done nothing. He demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the race issue, and is constantly sort of pivoting to economics and black unemployment, when that's not exactly the heart of the issue that people are criticizing him for. I think that Trump was talking really fast and not saying a lot, and if you had paused at any moment in that interview to sort of think about what he had just said, you would hear a lot of ignorance and a lot of lies.
Okay, something that he did say, Dana, that he's not taking off the table, hinting late this week, about declaring a national emergency. Is that a calculated move on his part to put pressure on Democrats? Do you see this thing playing out, that he indeed declares a national emergency, or do they get a deal done?
Well, it's hard to see him doing that, because it's not just the Democrats. He has the Republicans in the Senate saying, don't do this. I mean, first of all, there's going to be all kinds of legal problems with it, but he doesn't have the support of his own party going into doing it. So it's not clear whether he's trying to put pressure on the negotiators to come up with something, or whether he's continuing to give a signal to his base. It really has been about the base all along, because, of course, it's not really about border security, since all sides are agreed on that. It's sort of the symbolism of the wall. So it seems to me that's more signal making to the base than actually involve it in the negotiation.
Three scenarios here, Laura. How do you see it? National emergency gets declared, a deal gets done, or, God forbid, another shutdown.
Ooh, that's hard to predict, because Trump is really hard to predict right now. I think, the majority of the country really opposes using a national emergency here. And honestly, Trump has really undermined his own ability to do that by waiting so long. I mean, kind of the definition of an emergency, the point of an emergency is that you need to move quickly on it. So if you've waited weeks and then start declaring one sort of as a political move, that makes you look kind of stupid. So I'm not sure I see a deal happening either. A shutdown, I wouldn't count that out.
I'm curious with regard to the Mueller report, Dana. The president says he's leaving it up to the attorney general. But do you think that report would even see the light of day? And if so, how so? Would it be through an official release by the DOJ, or do you think it would be through a leak?
Well, there's any number of possibilities, Alex, and there could be two separate reports from Mueller, one that's for public consumption and one that's for the Department of Justice. On the Hill, the Democrats who control the House, and there may be an interest on the Intelligence Committee and in the Senate as well to have this out. The incoming, presumably, Attorney General, William Barr, while he's not committed to releasing the report, he has been very clear about the public's right to know, so there'll be a lot of pressure on him there. So it certainly seems we're going to get the gist of what it is. Exactly what we're going to get is entirely unclear, and of course there is, under the law, there is no requirement for this to be released.
I'm curious, Laura, are there more signals that the Mueller report is wrapping up, or are we only taking the word of Mark Whitaker when he said rather uncomfortably in that news conference that it was wrapping up soon?
I mean, you have to go on his word. Why would he say it was wrapping up soon if it's not? It has been going on for a really long time, and my guess for the past few months is that they've been really kind of closing in and circling in on Trump. And I think as to the report being made public, Congress has the power right now to pass a bill requiring this report or some, summary of the report to be made public. The American taxpayers paid for this really long investigation, have been waiting to see what comes of it, and so to hide it from the people would be unethical.
It is Monday, the 4th of February of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's been another one of those weekends, plus there was a ball game on yesterday, one of those Super Bowl ball games. I'm so old, I remembered that it was quite the religious ritual for many decades there. I don't know about it anymore. People hold on to things that are familiar, maybe a little bit longer than they should. Now, some people called the game very boring because it was a low-scoring affair. Now, a lot more people, I should say, were quietly enjoying the game because of the stout defense. That was exciting. But there's a lot of people that think the only thing that matters is the score. Okay. There's a whole lot to the game than just scoring. You know that, don't you? It's a metaphor for life. Indeed. Well, at the end of the week, I'll just remind folks I am driving down to Southern California to visit with my dad, and we're going to have a big bash for him on the 10th, Sunday, for his 90th birthday. And that is his birthday, actually. And it's a bit poignant in a way, even more poignant. My son and I had made some plans to take that road trip together. And so it's a little sad, and I'm happy that I get to see my dad, and I'm happy that he's 90 years old and seems to be doing pretty good. I mean, you're still a bit frail at that age, but he seems to be doing pretty good, and looking forward to seeing him. Now, what's going to happen is I'm probably going to leave early Friday, and I don't quite know if I'll record a show for Friday, and I just don't know. But, and it may turn out, because there's supposed to be a bit of snow in around Shasta, and I may want to try to avoid that, which means I may leave more like late Thursday or mid-Thursday. So I'll find out. I'll determine that as we get ever so close to Thursday and Friday, and I'll let you know. Now, when I come back, I am driving back on Monday. I don't know if I'll be able to do it in one fell swoop, or if I get back in time to put a show together. I'll probably try to get something prepared and see how I feel in terms of getting that show out on Tuesday morning. Otherwise, we'll be back in full swing definitely on Wednesday of next week. All right, not this week, next week. All right, so we got that out of the way. And what else went on in the world? Oh, boy. Trump and his interviews. He had one with the New York Times. Because he told the Salzbergs, look, just one nice interview with me. Just one. I expect it. I'm entitled to it. He actually said that he was entitled to it because he's like a favorite son of New York. Yeah. Ask New Yorkers if he's a favorite son. Huh? Well, he went on CBS for, I just don't know why people don't stop him in his tracks and say, let's talk about that for a little bit. He just talks over people, talks really fast, just like a mob don. God, the guy. Ugh. And we're going to all be dead in a nuclear annihilation. We've backed out of the INF treaty, and now Putin is developing newer weapons while he's also improving the weapons that he has. All right. So all of those movies back in the day, like George Clooney and Nicole Kidman and dismantling the former Soviet Union's nuclear arsenal and how NATO was involved, and it was a multi-country operation, and terrorists were trying to get the nuclear warheads, and Russia, these Russian former Soviet CIA and army people were going to sell warheads to the terrorists, and they did. And now we're going to go ahead and just develop better and more modern nuke weapons, as if the old ones weren't effective killers in their own right. Well, really what they're looking for are nuke weapons that will kill people but leave property usable. Is that possible? It could be. And the Bush administration was developing weapons that killed people, but left the building standing so you could use them once again. Maybe sell them. I mean, that's the whole idea. Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. Everybody in real estate knows that. What's on the rest of the menu? I'm going to flog that joke until, well, the next millennia, if I ever get there. What's on the rest of the menu? Well, of course, at the top, Trump's Super Bowl interview was filled with a lot of ignorance and a lot of lies. Because that's what this guy does. He's the president of the United States. You can't trust him. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, we're going to look at 90 Democrats and one lone Republican who signed on to a bill giving back pay to federal contract workers. Trump just loves to stiff his contractors, and he does all the time. He actually sues them, and they end up owing him money. Great job if you can get it. Trumpist judges are standing up for the most oppressed people in the country, white Republican elected officials. It's a get-out-of-free-jail racism card. Yeah! And the Trump administration claims reuniting separated children with their parents is an undue burden and would traumatize the children irreparably by ripping them away from their host families. They already ripped them away once, and they were terribly traumatized, and we just got these kids used to the idea that they'll never see their parents again, and now you're going to bring up their parents? We're just here for the children. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where teens with anti-vaxx parents are seeking out help online to secretly get vaccinated. Now those are the children of the future. Thank God they're here. And a new study surprisingly finds Neanderthals were sprinters rather than distance runners. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the chat room link on the rightish of the page. Go ahead, you'll notice it if you look. And that is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing that for us. And to the leftish of at the bottom of the page at netrootsradio.com, from that chat room link is the contribute button. And all kidding aside, if you can become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that recurring contribution helps us pay our bills, which is very important in being able to fly under the radar and keep Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended. So thank you for your generosity. And we are still in, well, I guess you would call it a drive to increase our Patreons. Bills are going up, and I got to say, incomes are coming down. So I know it's tough. But if you could afford just a cup of coffee a month and send those funds our way, I cannot express and describe how much that helps. It does. And you're responsible for it. So thank you. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that platform, and we are forever grateful that he does that. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I do post the show notes and links diary, a very integral part to this multimedia operation here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And that gets posted about 10 minutes before showtime, and social media gets those links a little bit after that. And, of course, that's on Daily Co's, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Right alongside with a not-so-fine podcast, because they're all there. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way by Stephanie Griffith of Think Progress. Darcia Brown finally returned to patrolling the halls of the Smithsonian Natural History Museum last week after the federal shutdown forced her and her fellow security guards off the job in December. Brown, who lives in Washington, D.C., lost 5 weeks of wages, nearly 10% of her annual income, and she has no idea if she'll ever see that money. She knows that unlike other federal government employees, as a contract worker, there is no guarantee that she will be compensated for her lost pay. I lost about $1,500 to $2,000 in wages. Brown, age 22, told Think Progress, "I would like to get my back pay because I'm a hard worker, just like any other federal worker." "Yeah, but you didn't clock in, did you? So if there's no hours there, we can't pay you." "Oh, salaried?" "Oh, well, let's read the fine print here." I don't know. Now, I've worked as a contract worker in private industry, as a sub to a sub, shall we say? And it is a scam. I mean, we all know about the temp agencies. They'll charge a company maybe $20. Well, this is back in the day. Maybe it's much more than that now. But we'll just, arbitrary sum. They'll charge the company $20 an hour for you to come in and type, but pay you maybe $8 an hour. And then they pocket the rest. Because, it's high administrative costs, obviously. Well, I don't know. Making money off of people. Isn't that the American dream? So, I guess this is just another one of those business models, except extended to, federal government. As of Friday, 40 Senate Democrats and 50 Democrats in the House had endorsed legislation that would give back pay to federal contract workers. So far, the bill has the backing of just one lone GOP lawmaker, Senator Susan Collins. Which means she won't be backing that much longer, will now she? I mean, she's not called Susan Collins for nothing. I made a bad mistake of looking at BuzzFeed over the weekend. Now, they laid off some of the finest investigative journalists and reporters in the game right now, and they've been working at BuzzFeed and got recruited from other press organizations to work for BuzzFeed, and then they all got laid off. And I was looking at BuzzFeed at this article, how far they've fallen, entitled, "If you could be a fart, what kind of fart would you be?" I had to go to another site. I just had to, because those are questions that I really had answered right before puberty. Those metaphysical questions were already decided from the available scientific evidence, I must say. All right. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Speaking of hot air, these Trumpist judges have a lot, don't they? Ian Millhiser of Think Progress, who I am hoping they don't fall to, what kind of fart would you be type of articles. I just hope not. Less than 2 weeks after Trump took office, a Republican federal judge in Alabama handed down an absolutely shocking opinion. The legal claims in Lewis v. Bentley are, to be fair, a bit of a stretch. After the majority black city council in Birmingham, Alabama, enacted an ordinance raising the minimum wage in Birmingham, the state legislature passed a law invalidating the ordinance. Every state lawmaker who supported the law was white, as was the governor who signed it. The plaintiffs in Lewis claim that this state law was enacted with racist intent, which would make it unconstitutional, rather than simply out of a desire to maintain conservative labor policy throughout the state. Which beggars the question, isn't conservative labor policy filled with racist intent to begin with? So, if we had a reasonable Supreme Court, they may come to that decision. I know lower courts did. Yet, Judge R. David Proctor, a George W. Bush appointee, did not simply dismiss this case. He handed down an opinion that, if embraced by higher courts, would eviscerate virtually any civil rights plaintiff's ability to challenge a facially neutral law that was enacted in order to harm people of color. When a state can offer a legitimate, that is, a non-racist explanation for why a law should exist, only the clearest proof that lawmakers acted with racist intent will allow a court to look past that explanation. It should be noted that none of the cases Proctor cited to support this novel legal rule even came close to supporting it. And a panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit, that's not a liberal court by any means, in this reporter's opinion. They tossed out Porter's clearest proof standard last July. Recklessly plucked from an unrelated line of precedent, Judge Charles Wilson wrote of Proctor's attempt to immunize racist lawmakers from suits. This requirement runs contrary to decades of established equal protection jurisprudence. Well, we all know original intent is the intent that somebody in this epoch has originally come up with. As if it's a fiction, it's so original. There is an unhappy epilogue to this story for future civil rights plaintiffs. The full 11th Circuit, now flush with 3 Trump judges, announced on Wednesday that it was tossing out Judge Wilson's opinion and that the full court would rehear the case. There's now a very real risk that Proctor's clearest proof test will become the law in several southern states, because it's just their heritage of economic anxiety, after all. It's not racism. Alan Smith of the New Civil Rights Movement brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. As part of a lawsuit by the ACLU against ICE, administration officials have admitted that it would take too much effort to reunite families the government separated before it implemented its zero-tolerance policy towards asylum seekers and others that the government enacted last April. The administration does not refute a report by the Office of the Inspector General of the Department of Health and Human Services released in January that claims thousands more families have been separated that had previously been mentioned, and that family separations were ongoing prior to the formal introduction of the policies that have led to 2,800 children being separated from their families from April to June of 2018, and I would say that's just 2,800 that we know about. Because ICE and DHS as a whole, run by Kirstjen Nielsen, Siegel, seem to have not kept proper paperwork like a true Teutonic knight would. HHS also has said that they simply do not know how many children have been separated from their parents, and that because no one implemented any form of record keeping on these separations, it would be an undue burden to do so. Now that's spoken like a true Nazi bureaucrat right there. It seems to be genetic. Jalan Sulag, Deputy Director of the Office of Refugee Settlement, said that, in my judgment, ORR does not have the requisite staff for such a project, indicating that it would take 100 analysts from the ORR with full 8-hour days, somewhere between 7 to 15 months, to begin even reconciling the requisite data. Really? Why don't you farm it out to private industry, you little schmuck? The Trump administration's response is a shocking concession that it cannot easily find thousands of children it ripped from parents and doesn't even think it's worth the time to locate each of them. That was ACLU lawyer Lee Gellernert. The administration also doesn't dispute the separations are ongoing in significant numbers. A federal court required the government reunify all separated families with 30 days or by 30 days last June. But by September, the government told the court it had reunified or released 2,167 of the total 2,551 children under 5 that had been separated from their parents. Let me repeat that. 2,167 children under 5 out of a total of 2,551 have been separated from their parents that we know about. And they don't even care about them. Article sums up, it is unclear how many more children may be wholly lost within the system. Because Nazi bureaucrats like Kirstjen Nielsen, Siegel, I think they're just doing their jobs. Well, let's get on to our break, and when we come back from the break, of course, we're going to go through weather from around the world, and there's more than just the polar vortex. But, of course, the polar vortex is the beating of the butterfly wings causing a hurricane in some other part of the world, because that's what the polar vortex can do. So we will go through weather from around the world and then finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Last Laugh. Stan and Ollie is less of a buddy movie than a tender-hearted romance of two friends near the end of their lives and once glorious careers. Based on the real-life comedy power duo Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, Stan and Ollie is a portrait of the two performers well after their reign as kings of the box office. Set in the 1950s, Stan and Ollie have reluctantly agreed to tour the UK and Ireland in order to fund a comeback movie, namely a version of Robin Hood written by the former. However, nothing is certain, and as the tour begins, the movie hasn't been greenlighted for production. In addition to funding issues, Ollie, played by a brilliant John C. Reilly, is having health problems and wonders if he's physically up for the role. Stan, played by Steve Coogan, in what should have been a nominated performance, is still optimistic that the film will proceed and believes that the duo still has at least one hurrah to come. While there are some laughs here, Stan and Ollie makes no bones that it is, at its heart, a drama. It is also a portrait of a marriage, specifically the professional showbiz partnership of Laurel and Hardy, and all the tension and frustration that develop over the decades, as well as the very real marriages of the two entertainers to two strong, albeit very different women. In particular, Shirley Henderson shines as Ollie's wife Lucille, whose love and tender devotion to him provides some of the film's gentler moments. Likewise, Nina Arianda is hilarious as Ollie's outspoken Russian-born wife, Ida. Watching her and Henderson play off each other is truly a delight. All in all, Stan and Ollie is a wonderful, understated gem of a movie, even if your parents weren't born when the pair embarked on their final tour. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. The time 300,000 years ago. The scene, a herd of horses struggling in mud. A short 5 meters away, a group of early Neanderthal hunters throwing a volley of wooden spears towards the animals.
And then probably coming into an injured horse and then perhaps finishing it off with a thrusting spear.
Anamika Milks, a Paleolithic archaeologist at University College London. But there's something not quite right about that classic scene, she says. Specifically, the Neanderthals' spears may have been more sophisticated and more lethal than we've given them credit for, which would alter that ancient tableau.
We believe that Neanderthals could have thrown them from farther away, that would have allowed them to approach animals that maybe weren't disadvantaged, and they wouldn't have necessarily needed to come right up close to the animal to kill it off with a thrust. Some of these shots with a throwing spear could be lethal to an animal like that if they hit in the right way.
This revised assessment of Neanderthal weaponry began with the crafting of spruce timber into replicas of an actual 300,000-year-old spear. The surface was finished with the same kinds of stone tools used to make the original. Milks then recruited 6 male javelin throwers to chuck the replicas at a hay bale. At 5 meters, they struck the target more than half the time. At 10 to 15 meters, a quarter of the time. But from 20 meters, just 1 in 6 throws hit the hay.
I mean, it's still not amazing accuracy, I have to say. I was hoping for better.
Though she points out that the javelin throwers aren't trained to hit targets, something Neanderthals may have been more skilled at, and the experiment suggests the weapons were at least capable of sailing much farther than had been thought. And high-speed video of the throws proved the spears could strike with deadly force. The research is in the journal Scientific Reports. The crafting of these ancient spears also suggests some degree of intelligence, a concept of or intuition about balance, mass, and design. For example, whoever crafted these ancient spears used the denser, lower part of the tree trunk for the spear tips, intended to strike prey. But we still don't know which Neanderthals used the spears in battle.
I want to emphasize that we chose male athletes rather than female athletes, not because we don't think that women were playing a role in hunting, but because we needed a homogeneous sample. But I'd be very curious to know how women did in terms of accuracy.
Perhaps another round of tests with women throwers can address that point. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO. This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can a 1-year-old in diapers be expected to adequately represent him or herself before an immigration judge? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that question really is not as insane as it sounds, because in 2018, that really happened. Happened because an immigration court, which is considered a civil proceeding in contrast to a criminal one, a person is not entitled to a court-appointed lawyer. If you don't have the money for an attorney, you're on your own. As Tova Indritz, in the recent edition of The Champion, the magazine of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, wrote, this distinction of criminal versus civil actually makes little sense. You're entitled to have a lawyer provided if you are indigent and face any time in jail, but if you face almost certain murder if you're deported, then you're on your own to represent yourself in immigration court. There is a case pending in the federal courts that raises the issue whether children or persons who are mentally challenged must be provided with counsel in immigration court. But, as Indritz points out, even if that case should win, the larger injustice remains unsolved. Everyone in immigration court who faces deportation should have a lawyer. Justice requires no less. And every day in immigration courts across the United States, justice is denied. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. The World Trade Organization, the WTO, is touting a global agreement on e-commerce. The agreement, amongst other things, would allow corporations to collect data on people and store it in servers in other countries. This has serious implications for the privacy of citizens and the rights of workers. To better understand the consequences of the proposed agreement, I talked to Jorgis Altinzis, an economic policy officer with the International Trade Union Confederation, the ITUC. I asked him if the proposed e-commerce agreement would have provisions for respecting the rights of workers.
No, unfortunately, there's no provision about workers' rights. And in fact, the measures that they're planning to agree, the policies, they will be spreading platform work and other forms of unregulated, unprotected work and informal work to some extent, like Uber, which is precarious employment and without having a requirement for data to be stored locally. So how would then a labor inspectorate, for instance, supervise employment in platforms if Uber conceals the data for employment of an individual driver in a server somewhere abroad? The platform doesn't have a local office or a local bank account, then the authorities, the law enforcement would have it even harder to enforce laws. Online companies are amongst the least accountable ones and might cause damage and then close down, for instance. It's not clear who's going to be held accountable in this case. Workers' rights are also going to be affected in several other ways. Is it, for instance, there's a difference when we're talking about the American workers' rights and the workers' rights in Africa. With this agreement, existing companies, the current giants, are going to consolidate market access, and therefore we expect that these companies are going to create good jobs, decent jobs, and high-level, high-paying jobs in developed countries, and in particular in corporations of developed countries. But there are repercussions for workers and job creation in Africa, in Asia, in least developed countries.
Who would benefit most from the application of an e-commerce agreement like the one being proposed by the WTO?
The existing corporations, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Microsoft to some extent. The agreement would aim at guaranteeing unfettered market access for these companies, ensuring that the governments cannot regulate them and ensure that they pay tax wherever they choose to. In my example before, Africa is an untapped market for the internet, with 75% of the people still having no access to internet. So there's a great potential there for that market to be developed. And the question is, why shouldn't Nigeria, for example, be able to help Nigerian platforms to cater to Nigerian customers, to create Nigerian companies that are going to create employment on a local basis and reinvest their profits in the market? The non-discrimination provisions in the e-commerce agreement would ban this ability of a country to give preferential access to data, only to local companies, another type of subsidies. So industrialization policies will really suffer if an e-commerce agreement is agreed.
What can unions and their members do as the negotiations for a global e-commerce agreement comes into effect?
We, first of all, need to consult with our members, inform them, and also talk with the employees of platforms, of digital companies, be them marketplace applications or websites like Amazon.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our feature stories and daily newscasts at www.radiolabor.net. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. European countries unveiled a long-awaited financial clearinghouse this week aimed at allowing businesses to trade with Iran beyond the reach of U.S. interference. That idea first emerged after President Trump withdrew from a 2015 nuclear deal last year, but countries worried volunteering to host the clearinghouse could provoke a White House that's threatened sanctions against those who transact with Iran. While small countries like Luxembourg were initially courted to host the clearinghouse, it's now to be hosted by France and backed by Germany and the UK. Each country remains party to the Iran nuclear deal and are Europe's 3 largest economies. Ellie Garan-Maya is a senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations.
It makes sense that they would be the ones to stick their neck out first, because in combination, these 3, I think, have a better chance politically and economically to push back against any potential U.S. pressure.
For now, the clearinghouse will only allow companies to trade essential goods like food, medicine, or medical equipment, none of which is prohibited by U.S. sanctions. But many firms have still been hesitant to engage in any trade, banned or not, nervous they'll end up on President Trump's bad side. Nevertheless, Garan-Maya says the clearinghouse in its current state is likely to be used, and that's important if the goal is to normalize dealings with Iran.
There is a large volume of trade with Iran in this area of goods from European companies, so it will actually practically, hopefully, have tangible impact on the ground in Iran.
Garan-Maya says that while Iran's government has welcomed the creation of the clearinghouse, critics of President Hassan Rouhani see things differently.
Government opposition factions have almost claimed that this mechanism is dead on arrival, because it's essentially allowing Iran to do trade that it already should be able to do. And they don't see this as an act of bravery or courage or real political commitment from the European side.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Oh yeah, it's comforting, and it will stick to your ribs, folks, because that's what we do here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 34 degrees, cloudy conditions, winds out of the northwest, light and variable, about 1 mile per hour. We are currently under a winter storm watch, active until about noontime local time. We have a mix of snow and rain, though right now it's mostly rain. We are expecting a high of 41, overnight lows of 25, and tomorrow we will have snow to rain. Looks like we'll have 1/3 of an inch today and 1/2 an inch tomorrow. Between that's just water. Any piling of the wintry mix will be confined to just about an inch or so. I don't know how long it will stick. Pollen is rated as none. The air quality index is good at a mere 8 parts per million. And the daytime UV index is low at 1. Or some people say low. I like to say low. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.16 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 88%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 47 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 39 degrees and partly cloudy with a weather advisory, which is, look out for snow and freezing temperatures tonight. Rome is 58 degrees and sunny, and they just happen to have a high wind watch. Kiev is 37 degrees with fog. Kabul is 27 degrees with snow. Hong Kong is 64 degrees and cloudy. Tokyo is 44 degrees and partly cloudy with a weather advisory that I hadn't previewed, but they are still under a dry air advisory. I was almost going to guess at that. But with it being cloudy, I figured they would not have dry air, but it is an advisory, so that may be taken down in a few hours. Sydney, Australia is 75 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco is 48 and mostly cloudy with looks like a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York is 49 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. Where is that polar vortex gone? And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Nicole Carlos of Salon brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Reddit, the vast online forum and link aggregator, is a digital haven for advice, self-help, and general discussion. For almost any subculture or topic you want to discuss, you can find a Reddit community. Now, as the anti-vaccination movement has driven more parents to exempt their children from vaccines, some teenagers are turning to online forums like Reddit to find advice on how to get vaccinated against their parents' wishes. Wow. They started getting birth control in high school. The next thing you know, they want to vaccinate themselves against the scourge of disease. How anti-Christian can you get? Lauren C., her last name is just an initial, to protect the innocent. An 18-year-old from Colorado who has posted on Reddit about her situation told Salon over email she has not been vaccinated since she was 2. She said her mom calls herself an anti-vaxxer. I haven't had my booster, she said. My mom always talked about how I was too special for shots because of my autism, adding that she stopped with the first MMR. Now, MMR refers to a vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella, a standard issue vaccine. The CDC recommends that children should get 2 doses of the vaccine, the first between 12 and 15 months, and the second between 4 and 6 years of age. The normalization of the anti-vaccination movement is relatively recent and has been wreaking havoc on public health. The CDC found that the number of 2-year-olds who have not received vaccinations grew to 1.3% for those born in 2015. Comparatively, for those who were born in 2011, the percentage was 0.9 who had not gotten their vaccinations. Though the gap seems small, the relationship between unvaccinated people and disease is not linear. Rather, there is a tipping point that confers herd immunity, meaning that enough people are vaccinated that the disease will not spread, despite the few who are. In the year 2000, 37 years after measles vaccination programs began, National health experts declared that the disease had been eliminated in the United States. Yet, in 2018, the second greatest number of annual cases were reported since the disease was declared eliminated 18 years earlier. Many public health experts have attributed that rise to the increasing popularity of the anti-vaccination movement. A county near Portland, Oregon is the latest to experience an outbreak, and it is likely not a coincidence that this occurred in a county that has seen a decrease in child vaccination rates. From 2014 to 2015, a measles outbreak in California spread throughout 8 states. Of the California residents who had measles, 45% were unvaccinated.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way by way of the conversation, which is out of Australia. And just summing up very quickly, because I'm going to have to get out of here a tad early, I've got a medical appointment to take to my mother to. And I thought it was a little bit later, but I was mistaken. It looks like recent studies have surprisingly found out that Neanderthals were actually sprinters rather than long-distance runners. That may have been the Homo sapiens who were the long-distance runners and not the Neanderthals. And, of course, the Neanderthals have for millennia been considered to be subhuman and not quite up to snuff, and that they were nothing more than mere animals with a humanoid form. Yet it turns out that they were highly intelligent, highly creative, and they may have been genocided along with the Denisovans. By who? A superior race? I wonder sometimes. All right, so we better get out of here. Do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day because there's a lot more breaking news. And, of course, it's State of the Union tomorrow, so there's going to be a lot of news coming up on that. We'll meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365 for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair. t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.